The Steelers decided to move on from Mike Tomlin, and it's helping the Chargers in a big way because one of his top assistants is headed to Los Angeles.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, man? Welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day as part of the #1 sports podcast network. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, Chris O'Leary, the Chargers defensive coordinator, is adding coaches to his staff. And one guy he got very lucky to add with a ton of experience is Denzel Martin, the outside linebackers coach from the Pittsburgh Steelers, was there for a very long time and got a lot of guys to play really, really good football under his tutelage. And they also found their inside linebackers coach as well. Spence is a former NFL player and also had a lot of success with Chris O'Leary at Western Michigan, where he had some great success with his pass rusher who is about to get paid and get drafted very, very high. And the coaching staff on the offensive side almost completely set outside of just a couple of positions.
Yeah, it feels like any day now we could be getting the coaching staff is set, kind of sent out by this Chargers team. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. David, it's not often you see someone like the Chargers are getting in Denzel Martin getting hired as an assistant to do something he's already done at a very high level over the last several years, and that's exactly what's happening. Per Jordan Schultz, sources say the Chargers are hiring former Steelers outside linebackers coach Denzel Martin as an assistant outside linebackers coach on Jim Harbaugh's staff. And like I said, Mike Tomlin let go. Maybe not as much of a surprise, but he'd been there forever. This is one of the guys who was very rapidly rising up through the defensive side of their coaching staff. And now, since, Mike Tomlin's taking a year away, he's kind of just out there and the Chargers find a way to go get him.
I mean, this is a fantastic move. I mean, I think when you look at this type of position coach and how long he's been working with this same type of unit, you don't see them be an assistant for this long. Usually they're already moving up the chain and they're, having opportunities for other positions. And hey, who knows? Maybe he did have opportunities to, take on a higher position, but maybe saw the opportunity to join a franchise who is on the up, a team that's been in the playoffs the last couple of years, who's had a really, really good defense and some really, really good pass rushers that he's going to be able to work with. And he's really been able to put his fingerprints on guys like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig, who have had a lot of success over there in Pittsburgh. And I mean, it's hard not to say that this guy had a hand in helping them get the most out of themselves and get that success.
Yeah, I mean, his first season taking over as the lead outside linebackers coach, TJ Watt, had 19 sacks. I mean, he's been there, assisting with that unit for several years as well. Even when he didn't have the main job title, he pretty much was that guy in conjunction with their defensive line coach there. But he's basically been the guy there for 5-6 years now at this point, and got there in 2016 as a scouting assistant, ended up moving over to the coaching side, but made his way all the way up to being their main outside linebackers coach. And all three of those guys you mentioned had 7+ sacks in 2025. But also just getting someone who's now been a part of 7 different top 10 defenses since 2016 on that coaching staff, because there's one thing you kind of always know about the Steelers, right? Tough, hard-nosed, physical defenses.
Yeah.
And as a coach, Jim Harbaugh kind of embodies a lot of those things that the Steelers organization, is really fond of and takes really seriously. And I do think the other kind of part of this is you do have a guy in Dylan Roney who is a young up-and-coming coach, right? Probably not the worst thing in the world for him to have somebody in there, right, who's a veteran voice that's been through a lot of stuff to kind of help him along with this room.
No, it's not. I think that the Chargers clearly think very, very highly of Dylan Roney, as they gave him a defensive coordinator interview so early on in his coaching career. So that's pretty rare. You don't really see that a lot. But we know with Coach Harbaugh, it's very important to grow his players on the field and his coaches on the sidelines as well. They want to get the most out of those guys. They want to help them get where they want to go just as much as they want to help the players get where they want to go. So adding a guy with this much experience that's had success with these outside linebackers to go along with Dylan Roney, who the last couple of years has had some good success with the Chargers, and obviously with Tuli Tuipulotu coming off of a career year.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for someone like Denzel Martin is wondering who's going to be in that room for him, right? And the Chargers did make another big hiring. They found their inside linebackers coach, Sean Spence, who we're going to talk about, really having to do a couple of things to kind of make his mark on that room. And I think for someone like Denzel Martin, one of the places where he could get a big win potentially early is getting some use out of someone like Kyle Kennard, right? Like we saw last year with Justin DeBoybe, with Mike Elston having that full extra year, right, to be able to come back and be a major contributor the next year. That will be what Denzel Martin is kind of tasked to do in some way, right? Him and Dylan Roney in conjunction to be able to get something out of a 4th-round pick in the 2025 draft, especially with the uncertainty of that room right now, with your two of your 3 best players, Dafe Owe and Khalil Mack, headed into unrestricted free agency. There could have to be a lot of development in that room. There could have to be a lot of kind of maximizing of talent in that room, depending kind of on how things shake out there. But I do think to get someone like this, who obviously seems like he's done a really, really good job in Pittsburgh, coming from a same kind of philosophy, someone that Chris O'Leary obviously seemingly wants in the door, Jim Harbaugh just wants on the staff, can't really hurt you, right? And I think if for someone like Dylan Roney, who's already getting defensive coordinator buzz from his own team, if something does happen to him, now you have a replacement already in-house. But that wasn't the only assistant we heard about over the last week, because Pete Thamel says sources Chargers are hiring Rutgers outside linebackers coach Julian Campenni as an assistant defensive line coach. He spent the last 2 years at Rutgers and spent the prior 5 seasons at Bowling Green. He's a former UConn player and grad assistant at Boston College. So to me, David, this is just another kind of one of those young defensive coaches that the Chargers want to get on the staff and maybe mentor a little bit and see what he can become.
Well, hey, not a bad place for him to kind of get to the NFL level and learn under one of the best defensive line coaches in the NFL. And I say that quite confidently, because if you see what the Chargers have been able to get out of the guys that they've had in that defensive line room, I mean, we were blown away. I mean, with Mike Elston's ability to get the most out of these guys and really not really see much of a drop off at almost any level whenever they had guys rotate in, and they had a lot of them, a lot of guys rotating in. I mean, last year, the year before, we were very concerned about that room. We just didn't think there was enough talent, and Coach Harbaugh said, no, we're good. Don't worry about it. I know we're good, and he was right. I mean, they're absolutely good, and it's probably because he knew exactly what he had in Mike Elston. So having a guy of that level, of that pedigree, to be able to teach this guy and really, bring him in into the fold where he's already had a ton of success, I think is a great launching point for him to start his NFL career.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And like you said, the Chargers defensive line has been maximized since Mike Elston took over, and have had a couple breakout players like a Boona Ford and a Tier Tart, who have both gotten big contracts, in large part because of the development or rate they're able to show on this defensive line. And I think now the thing becomes the conversation we'll have, later on this week, is just what happens if you got him some real blue chip talent on that defensive line? What could they be able to do? But I do think that, this is the Chargers kind of continuing that pipeline of collegiate defensive coaches to the NFL, just like Jesse Minter was at one point, just like Dylan Roney was at one point, just like Chris O'Leary was at one point. And so when you have that kind of track record, you get excited about hires like this. And I think especially with someone who's shown some versatility, who was a defensive lineman, but is working more with the outside linebackers coach. And someone we're going to talk about in Sean Spence, who was an inside linebacker in the league and has been a pass rush specialist, or was last year, from Chris O'Leary. But there's one thing that's for sure. When you're the only guy so far that's been taken from that Western Michigan staff that he just left to come to the Chargers in LA, he must think really highly of you. So we're going to talk about him because there are two things that Sean Spence has to get right if he wants to make a big impression. Getting Daiyan Henley back to that dominant form and seeing if they can get anything out of former third-round pick Junior Colson. So we're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Finding a doctor that you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. Sure, you want someone who's in-network, nearby, and has availability, but you also want a doctor who listens, makes you feel comfortable, and explains things clearly. That kind of doctor exists, and finding them is easy with Zocdoc. Zocdoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality, in-network doctors so you can find someone you love without all the hassle. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering over 200 specialties from primary care to dentistry to dermatology and eye care. I'll admit it, I've definitely been one of those people that has put off the doctor, and a lot of that is because, especially if you're switching insurance or you need a primary physician, you don't know what you're going to get. So having that peace of mind of actually getting some inside info before you show up has put my mind at ease a lot of times. But whether you want to go in person or do a video visit, ZocDoc makes it easy either way. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience covered. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in, especially because it feels pretty wide open. But I love futures as much as anybody, especially this time of year. So whether it's picking a team to win the championship, grab a conference title, it adds the extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch when leagues like basketball actually start to really heat up. And also, if you want to, there's still the Winter Olympics, which you only get to bet on every 4 years. So there's so much. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. David, we still have some more coaching news to get into because the Chargers continued to kind of fill out the staff, especially on the defensive side, and found their inside linebackers coach. So this is a job that we knew that was going to be open, even, before we ended up knowing about Chris O'Leary and all of that. We heard then Navarro Bowman, the Chargers linebacker coach, somebody that seemingly all the players were pretty fond of, was stepping away to kind of focus on being a dad because his kid had a kind of rising basketball career starting to come into shape. And the Chargers ended up finding that new inside linebacker over the weekend, according to reports. This is from Jordan Schultz, who says the Chargers are hiring Sean Spence as their new inside linebacker coach. Spence, a former NFL player, most recently coached at Western Michigan, and at the Senior Bowl, under his guidance, Nadame Tucker led the country in sacks and TFLs this past season. So, David, we wondered who was going to be the one to replace Navarro Bowman, and they did go from a former NFL player to another former NFL player.
Yeah, I like this. I am a big fan of a coordinator bringing in guys that he is intimately familiar with, that know his style of defense, that know how he wants to play, to be able to teach that to the players. And because, yeah, it's the same concepts. It is the same defense for the most part, but Chris O'Leary is going to bring his own flavor, and it's going to change things a little bit. It's not going to be a carbon copy of what Jesse Minter did the last few years. This is going to be Chris O'Leary's defense, and you're going to want to, and you really need to have guys that know what that looks like and know exactly what they need from each one of these players and how to go out there and execute it in the Chris O'Leary way.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that the guys who are already on the Chargers defensive staff that they're keeping are going to know exactly kind of what Jesse Minter was asking from them. Now it's going to be a little bit different with Chris O'Leary. And with this move, right, this is a guy that actually knows how Chris O'Leary called those defenses last year. But it's a little bit different, right? He's changing positions. He was last year more of an edge rusher, pass rush specialist kind of guy. And now he's going back to inside linebacker, which he has coached before a little bit. So it's not totally foreign to him, but it's not exactly what he was doing last year. But like we talked about, under his guidance, obviously they had one of the best pass rushers in the country, which is only going to kind of gain more steam as far as the Chargers' chances to try to draft him in the upcoming draft because of all the connections there. But like I said earlier in the show, there's a full defensive coaching staff over there at Western Michigan, right? This is the guy that Chris O'Leary has handpicked to kind of bring with him to the NFL level and still kind of fits the mold, right? Like, former player, spends a few years on college football, rises through the ranks quickly, and then ends up as one of the, the guys in this Chargers, pipeline. But also, right, how to fit the run in this defense, how to disguise your coverages in this defense, blitzes and sim pressures in this defense. All of those things, this is going to be one of their most well-versed coaches as far as how specifically Chris O'Leary likes to do things. But I do think kind of the two major wins that he could have in 2026, David, starts with getting Daiyan Henley back to kind of that dominance. We've kind of outlined before just what he went through on and off the field last season and sickness and off the field drama and all of that. But that is kind of one of those things that now Sean Spence is going to be tasked to do, which is get Daiyan Henley looking like, again, he's one of the up-and-coming linebackers in the NFL.
Yeah, because talent's not the issue. We know the ability is there for Daiyan. He is a very well-rounded skill set, and when he's firing on all cylinders, he is one of the best linebackers in the National Football League. I firmly believe that. Because I've seen it. I've seen this guy play with his hair on fire like a Tasmanian devil, be able to go out there and hunt down receivers and running backs and shut down tight ends in conjunction with Derwin James. So, yeah, this is going to be a big task for him to try to restore a guy who was a 150 tackle guy to where he should be, because last year he did have a little bit of a down year, based off of, what his standards and his skills are. So I think, that's going to be a big task. And then, Junior Colson is the big one. I mean, because the Chargers obviously brought him in with all of the understanding in the world that this was a guy that knew the defense, that was going to fit well, that had tons of connections with Jesse Minter and Coach Harbaugh. But we have never seen anywhere close to the college version of Junior Colson at the NFL level. So that is going to be a big undertaking for Sean Spence to be able to get this guy to go out there and perform, because they need him. There's a lot of uncertainty in that linebacker room, and Junior Colson is right in the middle of that uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to kind of rely on anything from him or kind of project him to be anything at this point, like outside of maybe being a roster bubble type of player for them this year, and that is saying a lot. But he's on a rookie contract still, so they're not really paying him very much. But going back to Daiyan Henley, I think, the interesting thing for him, obviously, too, is because he redshirted a year, it's easy to forget that he's going into year 4 right now, which means it's also a contract year for him. So he has all the incentive to play really well. We know he has the ability to be one of the better linebackers because we've seen him do it already. And it just didn't seem like that kind of trajectory where we saw him going, kind of flattened out a little bit last year. And now we want to kind of see that get back going in the right direction. And with Junior Colson, obviously, the hard part is he's been injured most of his professional career, right? And the small glimpses we did see weren't great. I mean, it's not Justin Aboybe where he played only 226 snaps as a rookie. He played, 250 plus snaps as a rookie, even after kind of being hurt and having appendicitis early in the off season, before the season even started, and missed a bunch of time with that. And it's just kind of snowballed after that. And then last year, playing in some preseason games, pops up on the injury report. All of a sudden, he's done for the year, right? So if you are someone like Sean Spence, and then all of a sudden you start getting something out of a former third-round pick who you would have thought would probably look the best in Jesse Minter's defense because that was his defense coordinator in college, but now you're the one kind of getting more out of him, that's a huge win for someone like Sean Spence. From a roster management standpoint, and from a personnel perspective, though, I think you basically have to almost act like Junior Colson doesn't exist. Like, you can't expect anything from it. Like, you can't put your eggs in that basket. Maybe we'll see what Marlo Wax can do. Obviously, Troy Dye.
Excited for that.
As a replacement level kind of player next to Daiyan Henley, who's been platooning with Denzel Perryman, who's a free agent. has played at a really high level compared to what he's making and to what the expectations were when he signed here. But that room is an underrated need, and it's something that the Chargers will end up addressing in free agency or the draft. And how much of an investment they put in that can kind of tell you how they feel about the room with and without Daiyan Henley. But we still have more to get into because slowly but surely the Chargers coaching staff is coming together. There are kind of a few ambiguous parts, but there is also one big position that pretty much surely remains unfilled, and that's their tight end coach position. But there's one guy that seems to make way too much sense to take that role that's still out there. We're getting in all that and more to this Locked On Chargers podcast. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction, and that's why I always use TurboTax, so I don't have to worry about it, and I know that they're getting me every deduction. But you can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. David, all of a sudden, after the Chargers had to put 2 new coordinators in place, it does feel like things are starting to come together, and you're starting to see some other teams kind of just put out that their final coaching staffs are set for the 2026 season. And now you're kind of waiting for the Chargers, right? Like, hey, when is this thing going to be completely finished? Because you have teams like the Giants and the Dolphins and the Steelers and the Ravens, teams who have, brand new head coaches who have now filled out the roster and put it out publicly. We're only going off of reports. Like the Chargers, outside of Chris O'Leary, basically have not really made anything official over the last several weeks. But when you start connecting the dots, you start to see, okay, well, there's not really many concrete positions still open on this team because you do have like passing game coordinator, right? Mixed reports on that. You have Matt Zenit saying it is Adam Gase. You have, Chris Rim saying he's an assistant, but it would make a lot of sense for him to be taking over for Marcus Brady, who is their passing game coordinator. And then you also have Ian Rappaport, who just saying, hey, he's going to oversee the passing attack. So that feels like it's a passing game coordinator role, even if it hasn't been officially announced. So that might be coming down the pipeline. And then you also have like the run game coordinator, who was Andy Bischoff, who is also the tight ends coach. That hasn't been official. No one has said, hey, this person is that, right? But then you have Chandler Henley, whose title in Miami was run game specialist. So I don't think we have the full picture yet, David, but it does feel like any day now we're going to kind of get this thing more concrete and say, okay, hey, this is what they're working with in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that this side of the ball was going to see a lot more of the changes than it was on the defensive side because they had publicly already said, like, hey, we want to try to keep as many of the coaches on the defensive side as we possibly can, which makes a lot of sense. Obviously, they just had some, 2 top 10 defenses the past 2 seasons. So obviously what they're doing is working. On the offensive side, a whole new philosophy, a whole new offensive coordinator with a completely different way of seeing offense and calling offense. So yeah, you knew this was going to be a whole lot of changes, a lot of different bodies in there, but you also knew that, for the most part, there's going to be some connections with, previous regimes, as we saw with the run game specialist with Chandler. And I think the big one that we all got caught off guard with was Adam Gase, as the passing game specialist, which, I mean, let's be real, it's probably the passing game coordinator. I think that's probably what it is. At least that's what it seems like it is to me. And he's got obviously a pretty diverse background in the passing game in a couple of different offenses. Had some success, obviously, with Peyton Manning in 2013 and other places as well. But yeah, I think this coaching staff is getting really close to being complete, and I'm just curious to see who else is going to fill this thing out.
Yeah, because there's really only one spot left, and I'm still silently, holding out hope that we'll see a different passing game coordinator. That's not Adam Gase. I would just much rather see him, if you want to have him in that kind of Mark Trestman overseeing, senior analyst of the offense. I could understand it more for a guy that hasn't been in the league since 2020. But as it stands right now, like that, it's still a very weird signing because that is the spot that has been kind of the precursor to getting an offensive coordinator job. And I'm telling you right now, if we go into 2027 and you're telling me that Adam Gase is going to be taking over the offensive coordinator role from Mike McDaniel,
we can see it now.
It's I'm not going to feel good about it pretty much no matter how this season goes. But the Dolphins, their quarterback coach / passing game coordinator was Darrell Bevell. Maybe, this is something they thought about giving to Shane Day as a promotion because he's their current quarterback coach on the Chargers. But Darrell Bevell was already hired by the Panthers this offseason. So, I don't know. It feels like that's what it is right now. We'll see once this thing actually gets put out officially. But there's one role that really nobody makes sense for right now, and we haven't heard about them hiring, and that is their tight end coach because we knew they parted ways sometime last week with Andy Bischoff, who is their tight end coach / run game coordinator. Now those roles are available, even if that run game specialist role, run game coordinator role goes to Chandler Henley. He doesn't fit the tight end coach role. He's never coached tight ends, and they could make him coach tight ends, sure. But it hasn't given that vibe yet. So right now, that is kind of the glaring position coach opening that still seems pretty vacant.
Yeah, it definitely does. And, who's going to be that guy? I mean, I think we go back to the potential relationships that, Mike McDaniel's had at other stops. And I think that leads you to one name kind of screaming itself at you, and that's John Embree, who has been a very long time tight end coach. We're talking over the course of 20 years, and he worked with the Washington Redskins, worked with the San Francisco 49ers, where I think is when he met up with Mike McDaniel, and then of course joined Mike McDaniel's staff with the Miami Dolphins for the last 4 seasons. So This is a guy that has a lot of experience with, and a guy who was an assistant head coach along with being a tight ends coach, and he's had that title for the last 8 or 9 years. So This guy has a lot of experience, and it seems like a real natural plug and play fit.
Yeah, I mean, he would be the prohibitive favorite if I was to put betting odds on it for sure. But just because he just did it for 4 years, if you're giving him the assistant, head coaching role, it's obviously someone whose opinion that you very much value. That being said, if he's your assistant head coach and you got fired from being a head coach, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, I think for the tight end position specifically, when you're going to be changing the offense as much as they are right now, and especially going to a completely different run game scheme, not completely different, but your major, focus is now going to be on the outside zone running scheme as opposed to the gap scheme. And if you're a tight end, you're involved in both, right? You're involved in the passing game, but you're also very much involved in the blocking game as well. So this person knows exactly what to ask of those tight ends who are going to be asked to be doing some different things under Mike McDaniel that they might not before under Greg Roman, where maybe things were a little bit more black and white. This is someone that's worked with Tony Gonzalez. That's how long he's been around. 17 different seasons in the NFL as some sort of tight end coach or tight end / assistant coach. A ton of experience. And it feels like, although there hasn't been any reports so far that he's going to take the job, when you had this job the last 4 seasons and then you had it 5 seasons before that in San Francisco, it feels like that's where it would be going if I had any guess. But what about the coaches who didn't leave? Because the further we get into this now, David, the more you kind of seeing guys who could be sticking around on the offensive staff. We already heard the reports that Nick Hardwick was going to be sticking around, and they have even after the hiring of Butch Berry, as we know right now. But Sanjay Lal is still around, and that kind of leads me to believe Sanjay Lal is one of those coaches that they wanted to keep on this offensive coaching staff and think he's doing a really good job.
And I would agree. I think that you can see, especially with Quentin Johnston, where we've seen some actual tangible growth under the tutelage of Sanjay Lal. His hands, overall, they have improved. His ability to catch the ball over his shoulder has greatly improved. His contested catch percentage has went way up from 2024, 35% to 2025, over 50% contested catch percentage. That is a huge improvement for Quentin Johnston. So I think that's what you want, right? Out of your position coaches, you just want guys that can actually get the most out of these guys, where you can see real tangible results coming from their tutelage. And with me and with Sanjay Lal, to me, it's crystal clear that this guy does a great job with the wide receivers.
Yeah, and you have a really young group, right? That's kind of all developing at the same time, because you have guys drafted, a couple years ago now with Quentin Johnston. You have Lyle McConkey, who's drafted in the 2024 draft, and you have Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith that are both drafted in the 2025 class. So you keep those young guys with someone who they're familiar with, and someone that not only has been credited kind of with the development of Quentin Johnston, but was also developing DK Metcalf before that, right? A guy who was all tools, right? And didn't necessarily have kind of the nuances and the refined game to play NFL, play wide receiver at the NFL level and really maximize the gifts that he's given. And I think Quentin Johnston obviously has made huge strides. And you hear stories from Daniel Popper about how he's out there with him, before games, before anyone else is out there. And they're just kind of working on that over-the-shoulder catch, because it's just something he didn't have a lot of at the collegiate level and something he had struggled with. So you see that kind of one-on-one development from someone like Sanjay Lal. He, obviously, if you can survive an offensive overhaul like the Chargers have had on their coaching staff, that's saying something about you. That's saying something about what Jim Harbaugh thinks of the job that you've done. And also, when Mike McDaniel's now kind of hiring all of his friends to come over to Los Angeles, he's able to stomach you staying and your ability to teach them now this new offense that he's going to be installing in 2026 and hopefully beyond. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. We will be back with you guys tomorrow. And starting tomorrow, we are going to be actually putting out some bonus content for you guys throughout the offseason. We're going to kind of work our way into it a little bit, because it is a little more and we're still getting used to it. But we are going to have like an extra kind of 15-minute show on most days. So not only are you getting the 30-minute show, you're getting an extra little 15 minutes later on in the day as well. Going to be trying to work on some more short clips and things like that for you guys as well. But just know, we appreciate all the effort you guys have done to kind of make us, one of the biggest kind of names when you're talking about Chargers. We're up there, right? Because of you guys. And we want to be the number one thing you think of when you think of the Chargers. And because of what you guys have helped turn this show into, we want to reward that with extra and more content, because it is about the listener. It is about the everydayers. And we appreciate you guys. So stay tuned for that. To make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media, at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also find the show all of those places, but an ad-free audio version of the show in the Everydayer Club now too, where you can do that for $5 a month. In the show notes you can find it, but it's just the ad-free audio version of the show, no ads in it, and also you get access to the exclusive Locked On Chargers Discord channel. So trying some new things, but some bonus free content coming your guys' way soon. But make sure you're back here tomorrow. Hit us up on social media, because it is Buy or Sell Tuesday, giving us your biggest Charger storylines and overreactions. So hit us up for that, or call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.